When I think about the different musical phases, I also think about like whatever substances I was abusing then too. I can't help it.
Yeah, no, of course. I'm guessing this is weed, no?
I mean, at that time, I was really all over the place. Like I was trying everything I had never tried before. I was getting into some harder drugs around then too.
What about Slint? What are you abusing then?
Brian swears that I showed up at all the practices stoned, but I think I was just naturally stoned all the time. I mean, I didn't do much when I was in Slint at all. Oh, no, I did. I did some acid and stuff now that I think about it, because I was really into surrealism and I was trying to make musical surrealism as well as, little sketches and stuff. I was really into acid too, and when I was in college, like I would take it at the drop of a hat. Like I would like, oh, it's snowing, I'll take some acid. Oh, it's not snowing, I'll take some acid.
Welcome to Discograffiti, the podcast that gives Gen X music maniacs a chance to smell like teen spirit again by connecting with the brotherhood obsessed with rating the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever mattered. I'm your host, Dave Gebrow, and with 3 new episodes each week, you're going to gain a comprehensive knowledge of an act's history and output in the time it takes to listen to one album. In this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on David Pajo, part 3 of a very special 5-part Pajo series. Episode 3 is Papa M. That is the entirety of his solo career. The 2 remaining episodes, for all you fellow obsessives like me, focus exclusively on Slint and related acts like Four Carnation and King Kong. And Pajo is consented to rating all of that stuff between 0 and 5 stars, so unquestionably that is don't miss listening. Look, if you know, then you know. But if you don't, then you're really in for a treat. Because tonight's guest was one of the founding fathers of emo and math rock, with both Slint and Tortoise, not to mention his ludicrously prolific, insanely high-quality solo career, but just on their own, his collaborations with Billy Corgan, Bonnie Prince Billy, Gang of Four, the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Interpol, Royal Trucks, and Stereolab would qualify the man as a Hall of Famer. David Pajo is a legend. In the next hour, we'll learn about the surprise derivation of the Papa M band name from none other than Prince himself, exactly which substances David experimented with during his various recordings, and the 3 vastly different Papa M records that he is currently in the midst of making. Okay, first things first, you need to know just how seriously I take this craziness. Although this particular episode is a regular interview, the standard Discograffiti podcast is a music obsessive's dream come true. The guest and I explore their favorite band's entire discography in a futile but valiant effort to reach a higher truth. The show is heavily researched, and the music is always reassessed with fresh ears. We don't just cover albums. We do a searingly honest deep dive analysis of all EPs, singles, comp tracks, relevant solo work, and sometimes bootlegs and live stuff. Every release is slapped with an objectively accurate star rating between 0 and 5, which allows us all, the real reason we do this, the Tootsie Pop reward at the center of the rock and roll lolly, to come face to face with the true shape of an artist's overall arc. Be sure to follow along with us chronologically as we go. The link to our legendary playlist is right there in the show notes. Coming up, we've also got Jennifer Harima from Royal Trucks rating the New York fucking Dolls, both Vashti Bunyan and the Association rating the entirety of their own output, and Anthony Fantano, The Origin Story. So don't miss out. Open up your listening app right now and click follow. And away we go then, with David Pajo. Great segue into Pajo solo. Typically the way I do things with a discography is to really go in depth. So if it was a typical episode, we would talk about every song on every record. Instead, what I did was more of a general with shout outs of specific songs and, the main mood for each release. I've already been very familiar with these releases from when they first came out. When this was happening, when I was sort of collating my own personal research on your discography, I was packing my house in Long Beach, California, and was in the process of moving across the country. So these are more painterly impressions of the records without the in-depth analysis, but also it made it so affecting because your music is so emotional. By the way, we're talking about anything M related. Pajo solo means Pajo, Papa M, Ariel M, and simply M. The only M it doesn't refer to is Fritz Lang's M.
Yeah.
Why? What's the deal with M?
When I started making solo music, I needed a name for it, the entity, because I didn't want to put it under my name. I wanted to be judged by my past. I actually wanted it to be seen as new music at the time.
And when you say past, your solo career, can we agree that it began in 1995 with M as the 13th letter?
Well, I think it was actually around the same time, but I was asked to contribute a song to an Asian American compilation. And I just recorded on a 4-track cassette and gave it to him. But that was my first recorded release where I played all the instruments like drums and bass and guitar, and it came out. And I think that was either 95 or 94, maybe even. But it came out before that M is the 13th letter single. It was a cover song of João Gilberto. He did this song called Undo. And I made this really long version of it where I don't remember much about it. It was really lo-fi because it was on cassette. So there's all this hiss and then...
yes.
And there's just acoustic guitar and vocals for about, I don't know, like 10 minutes or something. And then all the instruments come in at the very end for a short period of time.
So somebody asked you to do this, and this begat then an entire solo career? Was it just like, oh shit, this is fun, I like this, and I can see myself doing it? Or had you been thinking about it previous to that?
When I was growing up and learning guitar, I was lucky to have a cassette 4-track. So I always made home recordings. So this has been something I've been doing my whole life, but I never went past the 4-track cassette. And I never shared it with anybody unless it was like, oh, I have this idea for a song. Here, I'll play this for you. But I was always recording myself, layering tracks and overdubbing, but I never shared it. And also being around people like John McIntyre and Brad Wood and Chicago audio engineers, I wanted to learn more about recording. I wanted to go beyond the cassette 4-track and learn about microphones and so I thought doing a solo career not a solo career. It wasn't a career. It was more like it would solve 2 problems for me. And one was I was curious about what I was contributing to these different bands because I didn't know what I sounded like. And then 2, I wanted to learn more about just audio engineering. And so I would basically be releasing all my mistakes as I learned more about recording, I
thought it was fascinating that you are involved in creating these works that are perfect representations sonically of a style of music. And then in your own personal work, you knock these things out that are like audio verite documents like Oldham was doing at the time.
Yeah. Will was a huge influence on me at that time as well. We were influencing each other for sure, even when we were kids. And like, he would say, like, check out this record. And I would show him a record I had, or I'd show him a funny drawing I did, or he'd make a fanzine and we'd work on it or something. With what Will was doing when he was discovering his own voice, all the Slint guys were sort of alongside of that at the beginning.
Was the 4-Carnation an instigation for you? Did that light a fire under your tush to do something that was full on Pajo?
Yeah, maybe. I didn't realize it, I guess, at the time. Because when I did the 4-Carnation, I'd already done the first Ariel M record. I think I was still writing it probably then. Yeah, it did influence me for sure. Because we recorded that first EP on a cassette 8-track at the Tortoise Loft in Chicago. And just, seeing how that was done was like, oh yeah, I can do this at home. Like the Fight Songs EP was recorded on a cassette 8-track.
To me, that's in a lot of ways the come from behind knockout punch of your career. Like that's the one,
wow.
You've heard the ones you've heard about. That would be the first thing I would send somebody to if they heard the more obvious things.
Wow, that's really cool. I'm glad because I feel like TFC don't get enough love for sure.
Fight Songs is a perfect piece of music, I think.
I agree.
It's stunning. Well, I don't want to go there just because I'll cover it I got to put a nickel in the Slint jar now. I love Safeless, which is the A-side on that first release. More band-based and sort of brazen and puff-chested than your typical Papa M material. You had like a full band at that time, right?
I mean, I'd already written the song song, yeah, maybe it was like the Fight Songs recording. For some reason, I didn't think that I should play everything myself. I thought, it should be a band. So I just showed the parts to my friends at the time. And it came out great. Like talking about substance abuse also, I was going through, I think I was smoking a lot of weed then, which is why, and I was really getting into drones and stuff. And it sort of has a Slint vibe, but it all kind of becomes a drone by the end of the song.
Well, it does have a Slint vibe. And the thing I think that stands out about M is the 13th Letter is it feels more of a piece with the Slint stuff than with the later Papa M's solo stuff.
Yeah.
Once it becomes Papa M, it all sounds of a piece.
Yeah.
This is an outlier.
Yeah. And once it kind of became Ariel M, that idea was more solidified. And the idea was that it's two guitars, bass, and drums, and the guitars are in standard tuning, like nothing fancy, and no effects on the guitars, like no looping or pedals. Not really. I think there's barely any with Ariel M. There's really minimal effects or processing at all. Just like, what can you do with that? Like, I didn't think that format, two guitars, bass, and drums with no pedals and standard tuning, I didn't think that was exhausted yet. And I just wanted to see, like, how can you treat it more like an orchestra or like a string quartet rather than, hammering out riffs.
First of all, what is M? What is the derivation of the band?
Oh, yeah. The letter M, it was kind of like an anti-band name. I really loved when Prince switched his name to just that symbol. Yeah, I love that idea. Like, I just thought that was genius because it was so, I still think it's really cool that he did that, especially at the height of his career. Such a bold move. And I wanted to have just a symbol. And to me, the letter M was a cool shape, almost like a lightning bolt, or it could be soft and curved. I just thought it was a cool shape, and band names, like everyone trying to be clever with band names was sort of not impressive, so I was like, let's just call it M. It's on every typewriter, it's on every keyboard. So that became the theme,
Yeah. That's great.
But yeah, it was really Prince that gave me that idea.
That's awesome. All right. So you have 5 releases as Ariel M. First one is just Ariel M, and that came out in 97. So emotionally evocative. It's easy to forget with the whole math rock designation that you are really, truly amazingly adept at being able to directly convey profound melancholy in your music, because the quote unquote post-rock stuff is so methodically orchestrated that to have work like this stands in such beautiful contrast to that stuff. And the orchestrated stuff is extremely evocative as well. But this stuff is like really cracked open and laid bare.
Yeah, I think that was part of the reaction to my experience with Tortoise, which I loved and I learned a lot from, but I wanted to bring more emotion into it, I think. And I wanted to simplify. With Tortoise, there were soundscapes where it was unlimited, like there was no effect or sound that was off the table. And I wanted to create really tight parameters with Ariel M, where there wouldn't be lyrics or vocals to kind of hold your hand to walk you through the song, like what it's about. You'd have to use your imagination. Yeah, I would be using those tools to express some abstract emotion, because, even sadness isn't just a dark emotion. There's like glimmers of light in it. One emotion is more of a kaleidoscope of different feelings. It goes up and down with what we would still call sadness or whatever.
When you started with the M projects, did you think that you were never going to sing, that this was just going to be a series of 4-track soundscapes?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to go beyond 4-track, but I thought I would just do those 2 things. Like I would learn more about recording myself, and I would learn more about what I sound like. Because I was like, what if I played all the instruments? Like, what would it sound like? And Ariel M is what happened.
So talk to me about Last Caress, because that is the moment where you realized that you didn't just have something to say, but you had something to convey through your singing that would really add to things.
Last Caress, well, I have a long history with that song, because when Maurice toured with Sam Hain in 86 or whatever, like our last song of our set was Last Caress, like before Metallica did it. And so we've always loved that song. And I remembered this story recently. Glenn Danzig actually showed me in a parking lot, I think, changing a string. And he said something about our version of Last Caress. And he told me the right way to play it. And I picked it up and I was like, oh shit, okay, that makes sense. Well, I was actually taught the right way to play it by Glenn himself. And then for the single, I did want vocals, but I wanted it to be like, did you ever hear the Charles Manson album? I don't know if it's
Yes.
an actual album. Yeah, I really like it.
There's some songs that are actually amazing. Eyes of a Dreamer.
Totally.
Eyes of a Dreamer is a classic.
I'm so glad you're familiar with that. And that song Lies is great.
Take nothing from nothing, brother. It's all just the same. So good. I hate to say it, but it is.
It is, yeah. But like I remember when I got the Manson record, I really wanted it to be this twisted, like, an acoustic madman, like into the mind of this killer. And when it wasn't, it was more kind of like 60s-ish and listenable. I was really surprised. So I wanted to make Last Caress kind of like the acoustic song that I wanted Charles Manson, like what I wanted him to sound like. When I got the record, I wanted him to sing about killing babies and stuff, And so that was my kind of tip of the hat to Manson. And I put these birds in the background, which are actually not even birds outside my house. It was like from a sample record or a nature album. And I reversed them just so that you can't tell that they're reversed, but something sounds a little off, And I changed the lyrics a bit. I felt weird singing about rape. And then Will Oldham, I was like, I feel kind of fucked up about singing this, even though I know that it's not my words and I'm not expressing my true feelings. And Will Oldham was like, well, you could change it to, like I fucked your daddy or something like that. I was like, oh yeah, I'll do that. Like kind of make it more of a joke too.
And by the way, always a good idea if you're not sure about the subject matter of your song to consult with a guy who has a song called There Is Cum in Your Hair and Your Dick.
He probably wasn't the best person to talk to as far as discretion goes. Yeah, that's a good point. I really love Will's lyrics, and he's not afraid to walk that edge of whether it's cool or not. He might go sketchy sometimes.
Yeah, his lyrics are haunting. I remember the first thing that he released where I was like, holy shit, is Trudy Dies.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Last Caress for me was a real eye-opener. At that time, there was nobody but Will Oldham who was capable of conveying that sort of generosity of spirit, who was capable of going there and reporting from that place of true melancholy. And then along comes you, and you're able to convey that same type of mood, which is priceless. Yeah, so then you have both things going. You have great songcraft, and then you have your soundscape workouts like Turn, Turn, Turn. Was there any incentive to name change from Ariel M to Papa M in 99?
I think at that point, I'd gotten rid of the idea that it should be two guitars, bass, and drums. I started to embrace the Tortoise idea of just unlimited sound, or like anything goes, basically. Like any kind of vagarious notion I have, I can follow. And so that kind of opened me up to make Live from a Shark Cage, which used all the fun toys and, weird pedals and Indian drum machines. It was really fun. Like I just wanted to enjoy making my solo records, and that kind of opened the door. And I didn't have the parameters that I had with Ariel M. I liked bands that had kind of like dedicated periods of time. I felt like I was going into a new period of time with that change of philosophy, I guess.
The next 5 years or so at least seemed to me to be the most, like the music was just pouring out of you.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just like any other period for you, but the amount of releases, that was coming out of you at that time was pretty staggering. And the sense of freedom, like for example, with Live from a Shark Cage, the next song could be 2 minutes, could be 15 minutes. It could be a phone message that you threw on there, but it all hangs together and is of a piece. So what was going on in your life during this time that begat this kind of music?
Well, at that point, I owned a house in Louisville, and I was able to build a studio there just for recording myself. So that's why I had so much output on my own, and I could experiment with stuff. And Shark Cage was mostly all done there. I did the drums for Roadrunner in San Francisco with this visually impaired guy that had a Pro Tools rig, which is really wild to have someone who's essentially blind running Pro Tools for you. I recorded one song at Albini's studio, and then I recorded I'm Not Lonely with Cricket at Tim Gaine's studio in London.
Right,
his home studio. So it was all over the map.
15 minutes and not overlong by a single second.
Thank you. I still play that song live sometimes, and I still love it. I'm surprised how cohesive the whole album sounds, despite it being like so ramshackle and recorded all over the place.
I hadn't heard Turn, Turn, Turn in quite some time before your version of it, before re-listening to it for this. And it's funny, the song that kept popping up in my head as far as the only thing I could see to relate it to would be Pharoah Sanders, The Creator Has a Master Plan.
I love the way the guitar parts interlock on that. And I guess I was into different music then too. I was moving away from the kind of musician-y stuff and getting more into the songwriting, the craft of songwriting from the 60s and 70s, from different bands like Harper's Bazaar or something random like that. And when I think about the different musical phases, I also think about like whatever substances I was abusing then too. I can't help it.
Yeah, no, of course. I'm guessing this is weed, no?
I mean, at that time, I was really all over the place. Like I was trying everything I had never tried before. I was getting into some harder drugs around then too.
What about Slint? What are you abusing then?
Brian swears that I showed up at all the practices stoned, but I think I was just naturally stoned all the time. I mean, I didn't do much when I was in Slant at all. Oh, no, I did. I did some acid and stuff now that I think about it, because I was really into surrealism and I was trying to make musical surrealism as well as, little sketches and stuff. I think it was just like psychedelics and weed.
Around the turn of the century now, there's an acid influence that's starting to creep in.
I would already done all of my acid, I think, around by then. I was really into acid too. And when I was in college, like I would take it at the drop of a hat. Like I would like, oh, it's snowing, I'll take some acid. Oh, it's not snowing, I'll take some acid. But I think by early 2000s and late 90s, like I think I was sort of done with my psychedelics, and I was trying blow, and I was doing heroin around then too. Not religiously, but I was, I would do it sometimes, just trying to figure out why all the other artists did it, I guess. Arundel was, I think somewhere I have a cassette version of my first time playing it. It was my first time that I'd smoked heroin. I probably shouldn't admit all this stuff, but I remember like first time I smoked heroin with a piece of tinfoil and stuff, and I came up with that song. But it was like, but that version that I did, the initial one, it's so weird and slow, and I'm still struggling to find the notes.
Yeah.
And then when I came back to it in the sober light of day, I was able to put it together into a song. But yeah, I was getting some inspiration from different drugs too, I guess.
I appreciate your honesty, and the systematic derangement of the senses can induce some amazing things. I'd like to think that those things are discoverable within us, regardless of the kinds of inebriation-based choices.
Yeah. I think I was trying to get to my deeper self, and I thought that by doing certain drugs, it would remove the veil so I could find that deeper self without all the other personality dramas happening.
Did it work?
It did sometimes.
Hey, lads and ladies, Dave Gebrow here. I abandoned my career and moved my family 3,000 miles to be able to focus exclusively on Discograffiti. And so if you're like me and enough is just never enough, then please visit patreon.com/Discograffiti and become one of our Patreon soldiers of sound. Discograffiti is an entirely listener-supported show, and it's also intended to be a 3 times a week music deep dive experience. So do us both a favor and consider giving it a shot. Trust me, I'm working hard for the money, so hard for it, honey. There's the main show on Friday, a Monday wildcard episode, which is either a soul-bearing interview with that week's special guest, or an offshoot show like Queasy Listening and Rock Cousteau. And then on Wednesdays, there's the humdinger of them all, Discograffiti's The Private Press with Paul Major. You got nothing to lose. If you don't dig it after a month, you're refunded, no questions asked. Once again, that's patreon.com/Discograffiti.
I don't know if you know that single. Is it Songs of Mac?
Yes.
Yes. Do you know that one?
So Warped.
Yeah, with So Warped.
Around that time, you were truly firing on all cylinders. I started listening to you around the late 90s, but then Papa M Sings and Whatever Mortal especially, started becoming aware of you solo as a major talent. Like the kind of stuff that I needed to be listening to and hearing all the time. The first one I remember was Eye of Mine. I remember that and being like, he's not just the guy from Slint anymore.
Wow, that's so cool, because that's one of the few totally original songs on that EP. In fact, that might be the only one that I wrote. I love that song too. I think about the words a lot.
I love the change where it goes do 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 do.
Yeah,
I really love the tempo and the rhythm. There's a relaxed offhandedness about it, but it's very much orchestrated.
I was really into Nick Drake's guitar playing, not even like his songs, but just like his technique. I was trying to do my version of that around that time period on Whatever Mortal. Mortal and Pop M Sings and
Yeah.
like Whatever Mortal and Live from a Shark Cage are such different records in the same way that Maurice is so different from Slint or so, whatever, even though they're both really close to each other in terms of time. Once I'd done the instrumental stuff and being able to use any sounds, like I didn't have the parameters anymore, I realized that I was kind of not being true to myself because I wasn't listening to music like that anymore. I kind of stopped listening to instrumental music. I was mostly listening to like Everly Brothers and like just old music, Jimmy Rogers, the singing brakeman, and old country like Lefty.
My favorite thing about Jimmy Rogers is that you have to say the last part of it. It's almost like it's on his birth certificate.
Yeah. Well, there's another Jimmy Rogers, I think, who's a blues guy. And so sometimes the old Jimmy Rogers, I have to mention him. I wanted to make music that was closer to the music I was listening to, which is what started Pop M Sings. And Will Oldham was encouraging me a lot to sing. I was touring with him a lot, and I really enjoyed singing backing vocals with him and stuff. That was my transition, getting back into lyric-based music.
It's so funny that he was your main source of inspiration, considering that you were probably the only competition he had in that realm.
Yeah, it's so cool of him that, that he encouraged me, because we did help each other out. Like I'd help him out on tour. He'd come over and help me out with my solo stuff. He made suggestions. One suggestion that I didn't use, but I always thought was funny was on, the song Sorrow Rains Blue.
Oh, yeah.
That was actually, I was dating or sort of dating a girl named Sarah Rain Blue, which is such a cool name.
You mentioned her by name in there.
Oh, yeah. So I tried to change it to Sorrow Rains Blue. But anyway, like that part where I mentioned my penis, because it rhymes so well with between us, I couldn't resist. Like, I was like, I wonder if I should beep that out. And Will was like, well, it might be off-putting to have suddenly this loud beep in the middle of a song. Like, but he was like, if it really bothers you, you could just put the sounds of coconuts being hit together or something. I thought that was funny to have some Fred Flintstone sound, like over the bad words. But I ended up keeping it. Will also said about that song, he was like, the first time I heard it, I laughed out loud. And then the second time I heard it, I felt like crying, which is to me, one of the best compliments.
One of my favorites on it is Krusty. I especially love the one that it explodes out into the band style rock action toward the end.
I had this tape recorder that I loved. I bought it in France, and you could record on it, set the record level so you could get this natural compression. So I'd record all these little ideas. And that was an idea I had where I don't remember what tuning I was in, but I remember I capoed just half the strings. So it's probably not that hard to play, but for me to figure it out now, I don't know what I did, but it was on this little cassette recording where I was watching The Simpsons.
Yeah, it sounds like you were just sitting in a chair and it just kind of came to you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to record it so I didn't forget it. That's all it was. And I was watching The Simpsons, and I didn't even notice that I laughed until I went back and listened to it.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I should turn this into a song with drums and stuff. I can hear it sort of like Jimmy Page coming in, like all of a sudden, but I couldn't improve. I just liked the laid back feel of that cassette recording. And so I used that as the template for when the full band version of that idea, and it's kind of like shows how the demos or how an idea starts and like how it ends up. I was just doing fun mind games on that record, I guess. Yeah.
So the EPs that started coming down the pike, the 1, 2, 3, 4, preceded by 3 songs. Actually, let me talk to you about 3 songs first, because first of all, you got the cover shot that was taken on 9/11, just in case somebody had the mistaken impression that you were a purveyor of happy sounds. That has what is unquestionably my favorite thing that you've ever done in your solo career, which is Lo the Rose Ceased to Bloom.
Wow.
I've always thought that was your most towering accomplishment. And also, I think it's somewhere around 6-7 minutes long. It's just a mood that I feel exists on its own. It sort of has a Boots of Spanish Leather, Bob Dylan lyrical quality to it. Is that an original song or a traditional? Or
I feel like a lot of those songs around that time period are all a hybrid of old songs and contemporary songs and my take on it, my spin on it or whatever. But that one was based on a folk song, and I can't remember which one. It's not iambic pentameter, but it follows the same rhythm, I guess, of this folk song. And I stole some of the words here and there. One word might, it might be like he didn't have shoes on, and then it might be that kind of verse, and then I make my own couplet that goes with it, or I make it about a wedding or something. That's a really cool one. I should revisit that. I forgot about that song.
You sounded surprised that I brought that one up. Is that a song that nobody ever brings up to you?
Nobody.
I mean, to me, that's clearly your best song. Like, it's a fantastic piece of work.
One thing I'm working on now, this is jumping to the moment, is I am kind of doing new versions of older songs. Like I just recorded a version of Rainbow of Gloom that just because it seems like I feel like I relate to it again or something, or I just found myself singing it when I would play acoustic guitar. Maybe
that record that Will put out that was like a what the fuck compilation of slick sounding versions of older songs.
Yes, I still have never heard it, but I heard it was like a Nashville version of all his old stuff.
Well, it feels like his version of Bob Dylan's Self-Portrait, like he's toying with people.
Yeah,
because those records, especially Days in the Wake and that era of his record making, was purposely as raw as you could possibly get it. And now you have like very professional pedal steel players and purposely anodyne, almost Peter Cetera-like arrangements.
I mean, knowing Will, I feel like that's probably his way of showing people that he wants to be not known as a songwriter, but he wants to license his songs to other songwriters, to other musicians. Like, you can take my songs and pay me because see how they can sound, but what I'm doing is more just like taking your old song that's still with me, like still can't seem to escape it, and putting it through my new outlook or my current outlook, which is like what sounds good to me right now. With my solo stuff, I never felt like the recorded versions were the definitive ones. Like, they were just templates for us to have fun with live. We would loosely follow the recorded versions.
I hope you're examining this period, because these EPs, there's an obscene amount of great stuff on here. Like Flashlight Tornado is a classic.
Love that song.
And I Am the Light of This World. Gorgeous, man.
Oh, I forgot about that one too. Man, you really, you know that part of my career better than I do, for sure.
That's my favorite part of your solo work, is probably from 2001 to 2003 or 4. It was like you were flinging these things out left and right, and they weren't just stopgap things. This is like 13 minutes here, 17 minutes there, and really self-contained works.
Man, that's really cool that you noticed that, because I must have really been writing a ton. There's so much stuff I didn't put out too around that. I found a bunch of hard drives that I need to go through. It's on this archaic system, so I don't know how I'm going to transfer them. But I remember pulling songs off of whatever Mortal I wouldn't use, and like taking stuff off of EPs and things, just different covers I tried. And I'd really be interested to hear the stuff that I didn't put out now, because I feel like there's some cool stuff in there.
There's got to be, because these releases, there were a lot of them, but they were brief. I mean, they all averaged 10, 15 minutes.
Flashlight Tornado, it's interesting that you mentioned that one, because after Berman passed away, I remembered one thing. We talked a little bit, David Berman and I, we hung out a bit over the years, but there was one time I ran into him in Louisville, and I think he was, we were both kind of maybe fucked up, but he told me that he just heard Flashlight Tornado and how much he loved the song. And he was like, the lyrics, like, you have a tone of voice in it that's great. He's never complimented me, like even when I met him in the 90s and stuff. That was the only time he's ever complimented me, but he loved Flashlight Tornado so much. And I remembered that when I wrote that, I just read Actual Air and loved it. And I was like, I want to try writing in a Berman style. And that's what I came up with. And that's the one song that he loved.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it is incredible. But yeah, I do like that song. Maybe that's one I should revisit too.
Yeah, that one for sure. If you're looking for more ideas, oh my God, please, Mary Was the Kind, one of your all-time classics.
I thought I had a couple Mary songs, but which one was that again? Mary Was the Kind?
So on 2, you have Black Was the Color and World's Greatest Sin. Solid songs, but Mary Was the Kind, that's the standout on 2.
Is that the one where where everybody dies by the end of it? It's so dark. Everyone dies by the end of the song, like no one survives.
This is piano-based. Here we go. Girl, skip through a little bit.
She chose There's silence next to me.
Oh, man.
Remember this at all?
Oh, barely. It's another one I have to check out. Thanks for reminding me.
Especially because these were released so fast and furious. Man, I'm begging you to look at some of this stuff again. Maybe it doesn't resonate with you. Maybe that'll be the takeaway. Then on 3, I remember thinking at that time, like, whoa, we went from these autumnal Nick Drake-ish ruminations to Truck Stop Girl and, and Wild Mountain Time, which is, I love that song. The sole original, Who Knows? And then even better than 3, 4 is interesting. It's got Long May You Burn.
Yeah.
That's freaking awesome. That has this interesting thing where it feels like you're really reaching for the heavens in a almost Brian May-like solo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Was that an influence?
I was going for a Brian May kind of guitar tone. But then while I was recording, I remember I broke a string. Like I was bending a note and the string snapped. And I thought it would be different. I thought it'd be funny or interesting, at least, to leave that on the recording. So I'm in the middle of this solo, and all of a sudden it just goes, and you can hear me kind of struggling to get back into the solo.
What's the story with Local Boy Makes Good? That feels like that was your biggest chance at having a hit, whatever that means, up to that point.
I think that has pretty abstract lyrics, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it feels like, oh, this could be a hit. And then the finale, which is batshit crazy, takes that right off the table.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
It's interesting because it sounds like you were moving so fast through the music that was coming through you that you don't even recall a lot of it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the audio tour diary series 1 through 6. Or whatever. I think there was supposed to be 3 more after that. It was all done during the Zwan period when I was recording with that. I mean, that was taking up all my time, but I didn't want Papa M to die. While I was playing with Zwan, I had all these ideas that didn't have an avenue, didn't have any kind of release. So I thought the audio tour diary would be a good way to just get out my own ideas without having them sabotaged by anybody else. Yep. And then I would also be able to keep Papa M going. And I really did think of them as like they were diaries.
I love this area of your solo career. And did Zwan effectively, unintentionally kill this mode of songwriting for you for a little while?
No, not really, because I think after Zwan split, I did the Pajo record. I did 2 Pajo records after that. Yeah. And I think we're getting into
let's not get there quite yet, because let's talk about the work you do with Christina Rosenvinge, Petals Weep especially, and Nickel Song. I know she wrote a bunch of the stuff on 5, right?
That's right. Yeah, we both collaborate. Like she gave me one of her songs, and I gave her one of mine, and we both worked together on them for 5.
5 is awesome. So it was a really good thing to come back and rediscover. 6 as well. 6 is amazing. I think even better than 5 with Diane Williams.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. It feels almost like, especially The Trees Do Grow So High, feels almost like a poppier twist on Fairport Convention. Again,
I think I was exploring the recording techniques, recording with Zwan. I was learning some stuff, just by being in the studio all the time. And being around Corgan, I was seeing how he writes these like pop songs, basically, And I think maybe that was not me trying to make my own version, but I think that's how I thought things should be done, at least at that moment. I wasn't trying to write a pop song for sure, but I think I was still thinking in maybe a poppy kind of vein.
You had the Corgan brand sausage grinder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then comes the self-titled Pajo record. Now you're busting out of M and seemingly owning your name. It's not your first full length because that was Ariel M. This is your second?
Yeah.
What are your recollections from this time of recording? What were your hopes for the Pajo record? And do you feel like, you were able to deliver on what you had intended?
Yeah, that one's a weird one. At that time, I was really depressed. I think that was the first time I had started where for a flash, the idea of suicide actually seemed like a tangible thing to me, or maybe a good idea. And so I was super depressed before that record.
Was it just from inside you?
As the ending of a relationship. That's how both of them started. Because I think I just had put so much into the relationship that when it bottomed out, I just didn't have anything, or I felt like I didn't have anything. I wanted to make a record under my own name. It didn't seem like Pop M stuff because everything seems so confessional, almost embarrassingly confessional. I didn't think it seemed like a Pop M record. With that one, again, like I make these little, when I start a record, I feel like I have to have some kind of box to work within or else I can't get motivated. And for that one, just on the engineering side, I wanted to make it all in GarageBand because GarageBand had just come out and I was like, wouldn't that be funny if I made an entire record with this free audio program that anybody can get? I also used all this great analog stuff that I had. I guess I proved to myself that you can make a record with any tool, really.
So you're more turned on by restrictions than by inspirations, aren't you?
Yeah, I think so. Because we live in a world where there's just so many options. Like,
right.
It helps with the decision-making process if I have to commit, if I have some parameters, Otherwise, I can hem and haw about all the millions of options, and it'll never get done. I guess every record's like I have to have some kind of restriction to move forward in it. Otherwise, I'll get bogged down in all the decisions that could be made.
You're a fan of surrealism, and Salvador Dali, he would wear shoes that were purposely too small so they would hurt, so he'd be able to be cognizant of being alive right now in the present moment.
Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah, I don't know if I'm as much of a masochist as that.
Exactly.
I mean, because I feel like I have enough pain to be in the moment at all times.
Yeah, exactly. Life wasn't traumatic enough for him.
Yeah. Let's make it just a little bit worse on purpose. Yeah.
I do find myself more invested or connected with the Tour Diary stuff than I am with Pajo. I remember when that came out. And by the way, I don't think it's a bad record. I think it's a good record, but it didn't move me quite as intensely as what had just come before. Although Mary of the Wild Moor is a real callback to, what I find to be the more effective material that you were gravitating towards.
That's the folk song where all the characters die. Mary and her father and her kids and everything. That's the only one that's lo-fi and is in the folk tradition. That's the only one that's similar to the Tour Diary series.
I love Manson Twins too. That's a great one.
Oh yeah, that was me trying to, I don't know, I have these weird takes. I'll try to do a Bruce Springsteen style song and it won't sound anything like it.
Yeah.
That was my Bruce Springsteen style song. I couldn't promote that record at all. I tried to tour it. It sucked singing those lyrics every night. Because to me, it's a really painful record. I can't even listen to it. And I don't even know why anyone would listen to it. And the only reason is because it's just the lyrics. It's kind of a disguise because the music isn't painful. The music is mostly upbeat and happy sounding. But lyrically, I couldn't sing that. I just had to stop touring because I couldn't sing those songs every night. It was just bringing me back to that place that I didn't like.
Oh, that's interesting. So in a sense, it was kind of the way out of the depression, but it kept you mired in it?
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe just out of curiosity, I'll want to hear it.
So what about 1968? Is that the same bag? I mean, does it bring you back to the same place?
No, that one was more positive. I think I was getting back on my feet then, and I'm such a schmuck, man. I was in love again,
Oh, yeah.
Everything's cool.
Yeah.
To me, that one's a lot more positive.
I love Foolish King. I love We Get Along Mostly.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And I've just restored my will to live again.
Oh, I love that one. Yeah.
That's great. Ultimately, at the end of the day, with all of your McIntyre gained studio wizardry, all you really need from Pajo is a hissy tape recording of you and an acoustic guitar.
Right. Which is Scream With Me. And I recorded that before the first Pajo record. You know that one, right? Which the Misfits covers record.
So you kind of took a break for 3 years after 1968, and what you came back with was the Misfits covers record, right?
The Misfits covers record didn't come out until afterwards, but it was recorded before that actually, I don't know why I didn't explain it better, but that was actually the impetus to make the first Pajo record. I was living in New York and I was like, I want to make an album, but I'm kind of at a loss for, for songs. And I was like, well, who's some songwriters that I admire? Maybe I can take apart their songs. And I was like, well, I love the Everly Brothers. And I was like, no, I don't want to cover their, they're based on harmonies and stuff. And then I I was like, well, I've always liked Danzig songs. I felt like they could stand on their own if you took out all the aggro and distortion and stuff. Like they're actually just good melodies and chord progressions. They're almost like, the absolute essentials for a memorable song. And so I wanted to strip down his songs and just kind of put them into a folk language that was easily palatable or whatever. And so I recorded those on a borrowed tape recorder when I was house sitting in Brooklyn. And then I just left the tape in there and just never thought about it again. And then I was having some promo photo taken or something. The photographer was playing it. And I was like, how did you get this? And he was like, oh, I was shooting Shawn Marshall from Cat Power the other day and she played it. And I made a copy from her. And I was like, I wonder how she got it. And then it was like the person I was house sitting for had found the tape. I thought they'd be mad because I taped over whatever was on there and then burned a CD of it. And then it started making the rounds, I guess. And then finally a friend of mine was like, I'm starting a label. Can I put it out? It's probably the most pure recording I've ever done because it was never intended to be heard by anybody. And then it came out and some people like it, better than anything else I've done. It's weird. But that was done in 2004.
Okay. And it just
before
came out.
That was when it was recorded. And then it kind of found its legs after 1968.
But then what wound up happening after 1968 to twist the spigot off after the 5-year avalanche of amazing solo releases? What happened there?
Well, just like having kids, basically.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. It was just dad life.
It's not like you're always doing something, but your self-generated releases, the next thing after that was Avila's Hexes at the end of 2009.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a pretty big gap. I was a dad then. So my daughter was born in 2006. So yeah, I was putting everything into that.
Well, we forgive you.
But I still did the Stunt Reunion in 2005 and then started Dead Child in 2006. So it was like, the music never stopped, but songwriting stopped, I guess.
Yeah. I saw you guys at FYF for the Slint Reunion. That was fucking tremendous.
Wow.
So Highway Songs, again, a whole shitload of years go by, posting the suicide note and all of that stuff. Did that bring you back to Papa M, connecting with that early voice?
Yeah, it did. Like I felt the need to use that moniker again to make an audio statement. And that's for sure a weird record.
All instrumental except for Little Girl. Unsurprisingly, the most traditionally Pajo-esque thing on the record and is the very last song. So Is this another intentionally giving yourself those kinds of parameters to look for and reestablish your voice while taking away the actual voice?
Yeah. I felt inspired to write again. My idea behind that record, or the impetus for it, was there's a style of composition called through composing that either McIntyre or Jim O'Rourke told me about. I can't remember who, but one of them had told me about through composing, which is where it's mostly like operas and stuff, where a song doesn't really go back and repeat itself, but it's like a soundtrack to a narrative. So it's almost like Captain Beefheart or something, where you don't have to follow any kind of verse chorus structure. The song just goes completely in any direction and it doesn't have to go back and repeat itself ever. I think that's all I could manage to do in the headspace I was in after my attempt. I couldn't write a verse chorus type song to save my life. Like all I could do was these weird tangential songs, Like it starts off with that metal kind of one.
The
and
Flatliners. And then the Love Particle, it's like oval, like Glitch Experiment.
Right. That song is it's like another song on the record in reverse, basically. And then I turned it into a song, or I just glitched it out like crazy.
It felt like you broke into somebody's house and you went into their closet and you were trying on their clothes.
That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah. The record, that's another tough listen. And that calling it Highway Songs was, the obvious metaphor that it's, life is a highway and these are the different twists and turns or whatever. But I also I thought it'd be funny if it was like on cassette at a truck stop and some trucker picked it up thinking it was like, oh, listen to this on the road.
I figured that the album title was actually an attempt at some kind of perversity, because if I didn't know anything about you and I'd never heard Slint and all I heard was Papa M, I would assume your biggest inspiration would be maybe Townes Van Zandt. So Highway Songs, it feels like this is more Townes Van Zandt-y kind of stuff. And man, is it anything but that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another tough record, I think. to listen to, but I just had to make it. I just had to get it out of me. Like all records, I cross my fingers. Like I hope that it's actually good, but I have no idea. I like it enough to put it out, but I don't know if it's going to, stand the test of time or anything, or if I'll like it later.
I believe it's a necessary album in the course of your discography. It's not my favorite, but it seems intentionally like it's not designed to be a favorite record, just a necessary one.
Yeah, it was definitely necessary for me at that time.
I do really love a Broke Moon Rises, though. What are your feelings on this record looking back? This one seems like a super personal one.
Yeah, I love that record. I worked too hard on it. Again, I was in the wheelchair the whole time I made it.
Right.
Because like Highway Songs, the first part of it was after my attempt and before my motorcycle accident. And then I had the motorcycle accident and I finished Highway Songs while I was in the wheelchair. And I also recorded Highway Songs in the wheelchair. So this was again, like, the parameters were for acoustic guitars and almost like Ariel M, because I started to realize that I liked the instrumental Ariel M stuff. That was the best, at least at that time. And I didn't want to go back and do Ariel M, but I liked music for 18 musicians. And I thought, what could I do with 4 acoustic guitars? And I was also into Arvo Part, that song, Spiegel im Spiegel, when I wrote my suicide note, or maybe it was the letter to my parents, but like I requested that song at my funeral. Like that would be the song I wanted playing, which is a pretty heavy thing to say. Again, like if I don't understand why I like a band or a song so much, I feel like I have to learn how to do it myself, and then it makes sense to me.
You mean like ingest their thing and their vibe and make it your own and kind of tackle it and conquer it?
Yeah, because I want to, it's like that's the education for me. And so I wanted to figure out what it was that I loved about Arvo Part. And I read about, he had that songwriting technique, Tintambula or something. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. It's a little more esoteric to try to explain it, but it makes sense to me. And especially learning that song, it made sense. I think the only thing I did that was off, that broke the rules. Remember that Dharma and movie making that Harmony Korine did? It's called Dogma Films.
Oh, yeah.
They had all those parameters. Like that's kind of like how I approach different records. And if I broke the rule that I made for the record, that was okay, because breaking rules is also important.
Right.
So the only rule I broke on that record, I think, was the bass and the kick drum not being acoustic. And there's one note in Spiegel and Spiegel where I wanted to hit this really high note that didn't exist on the acoustic guitar. So I had to pitch shift it up. But otherwise, it's all acoustic.
Did you feel any kind of a kinship with the early Sebadoh recordings that Lou Barlow was doing?
I loved all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Weed Forston. I love.
You know what? Weed Forston especially.
Yeah.
Holy shit. That had a major effect on me.
Yeah, me too. That early Lou Barlow stuff is, oh man.
Yeah, that was a major thing for me. And your work seems kind of a piece with the bedroom recording stuff that, not bedroom pop now, but back when, man, did it get hissy.
Yeah.
Then the piano sessions in May 2018, which reminds me a lot of Neroli, the Brian Eno record.
Right.
Really, really true contemplation music, like actually scratching your chin, sort of like classic contemplation that evokes a real all-encompassing stillness. Now, this is you went to England to do this, right?
Yeah. And that was after I gotten out of the wheelchair, but I'd been writing and practicing the songs nonstop while I was still in the wheelchair. Yeah. Again, it was just, I wanted to write songs on piano. And I wanted to use negative space has always been an interest of mine, like, using the silence or the space between notes, like it's another member of the band. Yeah. That's always been a concept that I've loved. And I was trying to do that, at least with one of the songs on that piano sessions, like use the space as part of the music, is an important part of the music, or use the space and the silence to express an emotion.
So talk to me about Bad Time Stories.
That was like the stuff that I was working on that eventually became the idea for A Broke Moon Rises. I just had these like little sonic experiments. And again, like I was in the wheelchair and I was these things were how I passed the time. Like what if I play this melody that's in, some weird time signature, and then I play another melody on top of that that's in a different time signature, and like how many times will I have to repeat before they sync up again? Weird. I guess it's truly math rock or whatever, but I guess that's what it was. It was mostly just each little interlude was like a little sonic experiment.
Man, do I hate that designation, math rock.
Math rock? Yeah. I mean, I do too.
It's your fault.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the reason I have to count and do stuff is because I'm not good at improvising. Like if I was better at improvising, I feel like I wouldn't have to create these weird numbered things,
I didn't want to get my hopes up, but it seemed like by this point, by 2018, 2019, that Papa M was back, or at least that you were toying with the idea of it being back.
There's 3 records that I've been trying to make. They're all really different, but I had the concepts worked out in my head and written down and stuff. It's been hard to find the time to focus on them. So, because I'm always playing catch up. Like I have other commitments I'm trying to catch up with. I'm eventually going to release these 3 albums, and they're vastly different.
Is it like a conceptual guideline on each of them?
Yeah.
You mind me asking about the parameters?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a way for me to help categorize, because if you have like all these billions of ideas and none of them really seem to connect, like I have to put them in little boxes just for me to release them, I can give you sort of rough ideas. Like one record I want to do is an experiment with distortion, like layers of distortion. And that's just for the production stuff, or it could just be a hint of distortion, or it could be tube distortion or tape or microphone.
Have you heard La Noise, the Neil Young record that Daniel Lanois put together called La Noise?
Oh, I don't think I've heard that. Yeah.
It's a similar process where it's just layers of distortion, and that's his band is the distortion that he creates.
Oh, wow. I think this is going to be less noticeable than that. It really is just like something probably only I'll notice. Because if you heard the songs that I have, you probably wouldn't notice, other than maybe it sounds not lo-fi, because it's not. It's still sort of hi-fi. It's hard to explain.
Are you recording at home? Is this?
Yeah, it's all recorded at home. There's also like, I want to revisit old songs. And actually, if you wouldn't mind sending me your favorite songs from that time period that you were talking about, because that's been really helpful to remind me of these songs that I forgot about.
You got it.
Yeah, that would be cool. I want to do old songs, but kind of do it in my current state of mind or whatever, which doesn't mean really anything. It's still going to sound like a Papa M record, I think.
It's exciting to me because you sound inspired.
I am, yeah. And now, since my attempt, my voice has changed, so I can't sing at all like I used to, like everything before my attempt.
May I ask, because I don't know how you attempted to do it. Was it a hanging attempt?
Yeah. I'd have stitches and stuff. It permanently changed my voice. And at first, I think afterwards I was like, wow, I guess I'll never sing again. But now I'm treating it like, oh, this is my new voice. Because I feel like singers that stick around for a while, like Neil Young still sounds the same. Cat Stevens still sounds the same. But Bob Dylan doesn't. He has like, I call it his 3rd voice, or maybe his 4th or 5th voice.
I love Bob, but it sounds literally like he's singing through feces.
Yeah. He's choking on feces while he's singing. He sounds like a frog now. Like he
does, but yet at the same time, his work now is almost as vital as Blonde on Blonde.
Totally. I totally agree with you.
I don't think it's as good, but it's almost as vital.
Yeah. I feel like he's being more open now than he ever has been, which is cool, sharing his knowledge and stuff. But Leonard Cohen had a 3rd voice, or maybe you could call it his 2nd voice. His voice broke again in old age, where he went very full on Barry White. He went from sounding like an almost starry-eyed folk singer to like he had this voice of Jehovah,
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's how I'm approaching it now. And I feel like I sing better now. I don't have the range. Like I can't hit high notes. My range is really narrow, but the notes I can hit, I actually hit them all the time now. Whereas before I was always kind of like, I hope I'm hitting the right note.
Do you have another Papa M thing that's coming out, or is it just under an assortment of different monikers?
And that's always the last thing I figure out. It's usually after the recording, I figure out, what moniker it will be. But, I feel like the one where I revisit the old songs, that should be a Papa M record.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like I'm updating. Or I think they're good songs, and the versions that were recorded weren't the best way to present them. I think that'll be a Papa M record, the vocal thing that I'm talking about.
I'm psyched to hear that stuff, man.
Yeah. I mean, I'm working on it after we stop. I'm going to go upstairs and do some vocals. So yeah, I'm always chipping away at it, and eventually they'll come out.
Well, you too have a record coming out tomorrow that's a 40-song revisiting of their early stuff. So if Bono and The Edge are engaged in it, that means aesthetically you're on the right track. Man, even if you didn't have any of the other stuff, your own discography is such a massive overflowing waterfall. All right, that about does it. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to our graphic designer, TODD ZIMMER, my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, David Pajo, Drag City Records, Jeff Kamara for hooking this thing up, my incredibly loyal fans, and especially the entire Patreon community, the Soldiers of Sound. I love every last one of you, and this show would not exist without you, my friends. Speaking of friends, it's high time for some new ones. They're in our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. That's the best way to find out what's coming up on the show, but there's a hell of a lot more. You get recaps of the day in music history, the ability to pitch questions to guests, polls that put you in the driver's seat on guest and band decisions, access to a thriving creative hub if you're looking for a collaborator, and much more. So make sure you don't miss out. You can find the link to the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound Facebook page right there in the show notes. And if you don't mess with the Zuck, hey, it's no sweat. Just email me at info@discograffiti.com and I'll keep you regular, as it were. So now that it's done and you want more, another way to dive even deeper is to get thee directly to the David Pajo series right from the beginning, which begins at episode 94. Then there's episode 95, part 2. And then, of course, the upcoming ones, if you're listening later than the day on which it came out. Not to mention the Pavement series and the Lou Barlow series, where I Gen X'd myself half to death from episodes 49 to 62 with the help of Lou himself and the awesome Bob Nastanovich. Also, episode 12 is PJ Harvey and episode 18 is Pixies. Crucial listening too. But wait just a minute. This is just the entrance to the rabbit hole. Join us as we descend down, down, down on Discograffiti's week-long Pajo Peyote 2 deep dive. Of course, if you're a Patreon subscriber, then you already know to keep your ears peeled throughout the week, because this Monday brings the Patreon-only wildcard episode, the David Pajo Patreon Collection Volume 3, in which Pajo and I talk about the functionality of shred metal as a parent, the splendors of slowcore mainstays Codeine, and David's most recent work with the band A Broken Sail. Not to mention Wednesday's incredible Patreon-only episode of Discograffiti's The Private Press, part 2 of our 4-part interview series with Texan psych legend Bill Miller about his insanely great band Cold Sun. If you don't know him and you feel like maybe you could skip it, I want you to picture the underground bunker that literally was built to house this record down in Corpus Christi, Texas, by legendary man of swell music taste Ashley Johnson, seeing as you don't want to fuck around down in hurricane country when you possess the only copy ever made of one of the greatest records of all time. Yeah, you heard me right. Make sure you visit patreon.com/discograffiti and check out the deep dive as a music obsessive's way of life. Most seem to be choosing this path these days, and here's your chance to find out why. Of course, be sure to mark your calendars, because next Friday, June 16th, we're coming at you with David Pajo again in an action-packed episode about Slint. It's part 4 of Discograffiti's 9-hour holy shit interview with the man himself. And so, from now till then, don't let our youth go to waste, lads and ladies. It's Discograffiti.